Rockin' with OJ and Seth Levit. Dab up in that fish tank.
Welcome back to the Fish Tank right here on the Miami Dolphins Podcast Network. Seth Levit with, of course, OJ McDuffie and DJ Preach. Juice, not quite a normal day here in the tank. It's been a tough one for all of us and everyone in Dolphins Nation, but particularly I know it's been really difficult on you. Heavy heart, and with the passing of a Dolphins icon in Coach Shula, and I know a man who was very influential in your career and your life. How you holding up?
Yeah, big Seth, man. It's a tough day, man. Start off really, really, really sad, but then I look back, man, and I started thinking about how blessed I was to have this legend in my life, man. Coach Shula was more than a coach. He was a legend, and you mentioned he was an icon. He was a pillar in South Florida, not just in sports, but in the community as well. What he did on the field was extraordinary as a coach, as we all know. But what he did in this community was beyond believable. And so, honestly, Coach Shula put South Florida on the map. He's the first legend that ever graced South Florida, and everything he did in a positive way, man. He taught us all how to be winners, both on and off the field. And he was a man of God and family, and a man of integrity. A man of integrity, always did things the right way. And I know he'll rest up high, man, with his head high. And, he had no regrets. He did everything the right way, man. And, he did everything, that you want in a man, not just in a coach. And I think after his retirement, I think he became more of a person that, you respect. Because I think as a player, you like, damn, Shula's kicking my butt today. Shula's kicking my ass today again. He's chewing this dude's ass.
Right.
Yeah, exactly right, man. But then when you look back and you think about it, man, he was preparing us for after football, for life, man. Be on time. Be accountable. Be responsible. Be respectful. Give back to your community. That's what Coach was always talking about with us, man. And that's what I think people won't know about Coach, because they hear the stories about how tough he was as a coach, all the wins, all the records. But hell, man, Coach was all about us being the best men we could be as grown men with our families. And, you saw the transition from him in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s. In the 70s, he was really, really, really tough. In the 80s, he was tough. In the 90s, he was tough, but not as tough as, everybody else in the 70s and 80s said he was with them. But then when he retired, man, you saw the family man more. You saw the jokes, the laughter, the anecdotes. Everybody sit there and they sit there and they talk with him. Dude, he really, 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 he brought it to a different level, whereas, I'm not your coach anymore. Now I can be your friend. I can be your buddy. I can be your pal. We can talk and we can chuck it up a little bit, man. And that's the, that's the best thing about it, man. A lot of times you don't appreciate somebody as much as you did until they're not your coach anymore or not around you anymore. You realize what he was really trying to do in life. And that's what Coach was all about, man. And, God bless Coach, Marianne, the whole entire Shula family, because he still is, always will be a great man in a lot of people's views. And like I said, Seth, this man did it the right way, man. And so, yeah, I've shed multiple tears, thinking about Coach and losing Coach, and, the time that I spent with him. And I thought Coach would be a guy to be around until he's 100 years old. I really did. And he had that energy still, and all that all that laughter, man. I see him smiling right now, man. Just a great man. And, like I said, South Florida, Miami Dolphins, the world lost an incredible man.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would argue with you there, Juice, and I appreciate you sharing those words. Is there any one moment that might stick out to you, a fun memory, a lasting memory, anything specific? And, I know you were his first-round draft choice in '93 and had 3 amazing seasons playing directly under him, and then, as you said, built that lifetime bond with him afterwards. But does anything stick out specifically?
There's a lot of things stick out, man. First of all, I couldn't imagine that he would draft me. The Marx brothers were just here, and one of them, Duper, was still on the roster. We just, got Irvin Fryer and Mark Ingram in free agency. So why the hell is he drafting a receiver from Penn State in the first round? Made no sense to me, man. But the day I got that phone call in April in '93, I mean, that was the moment that I got to meet another legend. Just on the phone at that point, man. But I tell you, man, it was one of the best days of my life, as my family's life. But I got to know Coach from that day on, until the day he retired. Our relationship and our friendship grew. And then after he was retired, I think it grew even more. But he was tough on me. He was tough on me, man. The first mini camp I had with him, Seth, we're sitting there, and I finally got one little shot to go with the number 1 team. I got to go with Dan Marino, Irvin Fryer, Keith Jackson. Duke was still on the team. I got my little butt in there.
It's quite a lineup, man.
That is a hell of a lineup in there, right? And I got in there, and Danny called a play, and I said, "Wait, man, I don't know this play. I don't know this play." And I know for a fact that we had not installed that play. It's my first mini camp. That play wasn't in the install, and so I called a timeout. And she was like, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "Coach,
don't be burning this timeout, Juice.
We don't have this isn't in training. It's training camp, so it doesn't matter. We got multiple timeouts then, Big Seth. You know what I mean?" And he's like, I said, "I don't know this play, Coach." He said, "Well, is it in your playbook?" I said, "Well, it had to be in my playbook because everybody else knew the damn play. It had to be in the playbook because everybody else knew it." I said, "Well, I don't know. We didn't install it." He said, "Well, learn your fucking playbook." And that was it. That was the last time I got a chance to go with the number 1s for at least, 3 or 4 months with the Dolphins. So I blew it, my first opportunity with Coach Shula, man. That was my first, big interaction with him. And from that point on, Seth, I learned every single position as a wide receiver, as a running back, as a tight end. And I was trying to figure out what Danny was looking at, but that was way too complicated for me.
But you learned your playbook, though, didn't you?
Damn right I did. Every single play. He wasn't gonna call me out like that because Shoes will call you out in front of the whole team.
That's what
it wasn't about trying to belittle you, but he's trying to let everybody else know your shit, because we're holding everybody accountable. You know yours, and we're gonna be okay as a team. We're gonna be a winning team.
Love it. I love it. That's really good stuff. And, we've seen a lot of tributes already today and will, I'm sure, throughout the week to Coach Shula, certainly deserving. Quite honestly, I don't know that anybody could do him justice, right, with all that he's accomplished. And as you said, did it the right way. But here in the tank, we only know one way to do what we do. And I got a call from Scott Stone. I was talking to Scott today, and we were reflecting, and he said, "Man, you have so many great stories. You have so many great stories that so many different guys have told about Coach Shula. And if you think about it, he's probably been talked about as much, if not more, than anybody on the show." And Scott.
He's only crossed over 4 decades of players,
right? Right. And even those who didn't play for him, you talk to the JTs and different guys. If you were around here long enough, then you spent some time with Coach and you felt that. And so we dove in the vault and started pulling out some of these stories. And I think what we'll do is we'll spend the rest of today listening to just some of the greatest stories about Coach Shula that have been told here in the tank. And I think one that we could start with was a guy who was your position coach at one point.
My coach.
Larry Seipel, but he didn't start as a position coach. He started much like you did on the field and as you said, feeling the true wrath of Coach. But he actually started with Coach Wilson. And so he got to see that transition for this franchise. And you talked about that Coach Shula put the Dolphins on the map. Well, Coach Seipel saw that and experienced it firsthand. And when he dove into the tank, he talked about how, a 1970 hit and the entire world changed once Don Shula was in South Florida.
Shula walks in 1970. All of a sudden, we're practicing 4 times a day.
4 times a day.
7:30 in the morning, 10:30 in the morning, 2:30 in the afternoon, and 7 o'clock at night. I mean, he didn't have time to go to the bathroom, for crying out loud.
Well, Channing Crowder has a remedy for that. Just take care of it on the field.
But it was really a unique situation. We're bitching like hell about the practices, and we're screaming, this is too much. Well, after the 70 season was over, we were kind of glad we did something like that, because he actually got us to believe in ourselves more than anything else.
That's awesome.
And it was a good time in 70 when he came there.
Was there a game or instance in that 70 season that all of a sudden you guys realized how much talent you had, how good you were, something that Shula might have said that said, you know what, we can play with any fucking body?
Yeah. And basically that's it. To have one game, I don't think there was just one game that did it. I think it was a gradual thing of the training camp and then getting into the preseason. And I think at that time we were playing 6 preseason games. And, we were all over the place.
They're trying to get rid of the preseason.
We were in North Carolina and playing in cow pastures and everything else. But I don't think there was actually one game that gave us any kind of an idea. I think the fact that he settled in on a group of people that were going to play for him and showed them exactly how to get it all done. And I think it all came together about midway through the season. And we started to play a little bit better each game, and it got better and better and better, and ended up in a chance at the Super Bowl, which was good.
Yeah, a few
got our ass kicked, but it was good.
Well, you made up for it.
That was a good ass kicking though, because what it led to was something special for the team and the organization.
It did more than anything. I think it helped us. Even though you say, well, heck, you don't want to lose 24-3 in a major game like that, but I think it got us a little bit more to the point where we got a little bit more dedicated in what we were doing, and got some players in who could play. And he picked up Wayne Moore on waivers, Jim Langer on waivers, Bob Kuchenberg on waivers.
Waivers.
Yeah, these guys were on waivers.
Hall of
and
Famers.
Monty Clark was the one that brought those guys in. They brought everything. And he brought in Mark Fleming. Obviously, Greasy was already here. I'm trying to think of who else. Well, then all the defensive guys, like Tim Foley and Curtis Johnson and Jake Scott. Jake had gone. He was drafted in 70, but he didn't come back until 71 because he went to the Canadian Football League first, and then he came back. So he had the nucleus to start with, and then he built around it. So
I think it was some of the best things about then. There's no free agency, so the guys were pretty much stuck with the Dolphins. They had once they were in, you could figure out the guys that were going to be the nucleus, like he talked about, and they weren't going anywhere.
They weren't going anywhere unless they got
cut. Yeah.
If you wanted them there, they were staying.
The only way.
So I want to go back real quick to that 70. You talk about 4 practices a day, which is insane. Was there ever a moment, like I said, you guys were bitching about it, and was there ever a moment or something that Coach said where I'm just trying to think of just a classic quintessential Don Shula moment where you realized that this is just not the way things were done in the past?
Well, I'd have to say, he kept using one phrase all the time, the winning edge. I mean, that was his kind of go-to statement, and tried to show us that, whatever he's having us do or the coaches are having us do was going to put us in a situation which was a winning edge. And it turned out to be true, obviously.
Yeah, clearly.
We won a lot of games from 1970 and 1978. A lot of games.
So he witnessed a lot of changes within the organization right there. And they had a party atmosphere before that, and then Shula had brought in some structure. And it had a good nucleus of guys, but they didn't know how to win. And he brought in that winning edge. And that's the most important thing that transitioned the Dolphins from where they were in the late 60s to where they were in the early 70s. So then we had Larry Zonka and Larry Little and Mercury Morris in the tank talking about
how special was that, man?
Oh, my God. It was great, man. It was unannounced. We had Larry scheduled, but then when Merc and Zonk showed up, man, that made it very, very special for us, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and they talked about how, when they lost the Super Bowl to Dallas, in 71, they talked more about how, you come back into camp and how things are, but you think that it's going to be like a new beginning. Not for Coach, was it, Seth?
No, it wasn't.
No, Coach was talking about the year before, and he showed the film on how they didn't want to have that feeling again, how they wanted to make sure that, they didn't want to have that feeling again. So those guys came back very motivated and led to one of the greatest seasons in NFL history.
The greatest, right? The greatest.
The absolute greatest. It'll never be matched.
All I can tell you is that everything happened so fast. 69 were doormats. Mm-hmm. I remember one of George Wilson's first talks to us as a team. He was smoking a cigarette, and he says, well, if we get a few breaks, and then we all bounce away, we might come out on top, okay? Now we go from that to Shula being in the middle of it, making sure that in the meeting that we had before we got to the stadium, he give us the first 3 plays. So you get the first 3 plays, so regardless of what's happening on the universe, you better get these first 3 plays right. So there was a kind of tactic that he had that allowed us to play in a way in which we just simply executed what we were supposed to do after practice, because it was nothing fun about it. If you see pictures of Zonk and Jim and I, there's never any of us laughing because there was never anything funny because we were at work. And I think that atmosphere that they created there, that Don created, it was one that the fans, they connected to because they saw that they had come from a losing team to an absolute winning team. So we go from doormats to 1971. We go into playoffs. In 1972, we lose in the Super Bowl. And then when we came back, he pretended like he was glad to see us. And everything was like, well, hey, good to see you guys, And so then we sit down and we start watching film of the Super Bowl. And he started critiquing like we had lost the game the day before.
Wow. He started the season with the Super Bowl film from the previous year. Wow.
And then he's reaming us out as if these things happened 24 hours ago, not 6 months ago.
You guys are ready to move forward.
And so now so everybody's kind of half stunned. He turns the projector off and he stands up. He says, "Now, you see how sick you feel now? You see how sick?" He's from Ohio. He can't say sorry. He says, "Sorry." You see how sick and sorry you feel now? Well, just think of how sick and sorry you're going to be if you don't go back and redeem yourselves for what you did last year. And he said, "But I forgot to tell you, it was just as much my fault because you can't be world champions unless you win all 3 seasons. The regular season, the playoff season, and if you're good enough, your season boils down to one game, and that's the game you got to win. Now, we're going to walk out of here as coaches. You better find a way to get done what you need to get done in order to get back there to win that game." And we were stunned, but we dedicated ourselves to a man that we would take practice and we would employ the game plan in the classroom and then take that and translate that out into practice, because we were brought up from out of the George Wilson League into the Don Shula League, where in summer camp we would run every play to the right that we had, the first team, and then the second team would run every play to the left, and then we'd come back and run every play to the left, the first team. Then we'd go in and watch it. And then so he'd point out your mistakes there. So it was always about mistake-free football, knowing what you're doing the whole time and taking it serious what you're supposed to do. So we set out not to go unbeaten. We set out each week to take that game plan and replicate that in what we did on Sunday. So it didn't matter who we played. It only mattered how we executed. And when you look back now, you can see that was the fruition of our success, because we did things the way we're supposed to. So we go through the year and we win 16 straight games, and they make us dogs in the Super Bowl. They said, "Oh, they can't win 17 games." We didn't have to win 17. We only had to win one. And that was the one that we lined up to do. And people can't see that because their vision of us is the greatness of going unbeaten, whereas ours was the redemption from getting your ass kicked the year before. Now you're back to the one game, so we just happen to go unbeaten back to that spot. So people now think that that's the great thing if they passed us. You can't pass us. Well, it's a team that'll equal your record. You can't equal that. It's an accomplishment. It cannot be duplicated. You know, how many times can you hit your first home run? Once. And so it's already been hit out of the park. So it doesn't matter how far you hit it this time.
I think the groundwork for the perfect season was laid at what Merck just alluded to, was coming off that loss and that meeting when Shula first stood in front of us and said, "Remember that feeling that we had?" And we reviewed that film and went over it just like it would happen the day before, just exactly like Merck said. But then he stood before us and he said, "Our objective this year," and I know a lot of people in that room don't remember this. I remember it vividly, because I knew after being through that first 2 years with him what he was capable of as a head coach. And I thought when he said the next few words he looked right at us and said, "Our objective this year is to go one game at a time and win every game. Every game will be the Super Bowl." Now, when he said that, having been what we had been through for 2 years, which I had never seen anything, take Marine boot camp times 10 and spread it out over 2 years. Now I looked at Jim Kick, and Jim Kick goes, "Oh, this is going to be a beauty." And, you know, I said that later. Bob, several people said there was no talk about, you know, a perfect season. No one viewed the season as a whole. What he said was, each game, we're going to practice being perfect on each game so that when by the time we get to the Super Bowl, his intent of that statement was to show how serious we were on each game in order to get to Super Bowl. Were we going to win he didn't say we were going to win every game. He said we were going to take it like each game was a Super Bowl. We're going to get so instated in that engrossment in what we're doing that by the time we get there, it'll be automatic for us. And you know what? It was. Outside of one mistake. Garrow, you permit. Fall on the ball, Garrow.
No.
Another thing, too, you can imagine what he had been through. He had the reputation at the time of not being able to win the big game.
Yeah.
So we could feel the way he was feeling. He had never won. He had lost, especially that devastating loss when he was with the Colts against the New York Jets. And then with us losing to the Cowboys the year before. We could almost feel what he was feeling because they were going to be saying now the Miami Dolphins couldn't win the big game. And we went on and won that game except for what he said about Garrow. It still would have been the only shutout in Super Bowl history.
Well, when you listen to those three icons, I mean, how amazing is that to hear it from each of their perspectives? And just, it's hard for me to believe. I mean, you hear guys now, you know, you play a game and you lose and they don't want to come back on Monday. They just want to show up on Wednesday and just move forward and not look backwards. They had an entire offseason, Juice.
Right.
And came back, and the first day they think they're starting fresh as the second best team in the entire league. And he is breaking down film. Coach Shula is breaking down film from that Super Bowl and humiliating them in a lot of ways. And you don't want this feeling again. I mean, that's just epic. It's epic.
You talk about motivation, right? You talk about motivation, man. But you know what? That team was already on their way with motivation, Seth, and I think they were hungry as well. But the fact that Coach, it burned him for a whole off season.
Yeah. Well, he was hungry too. You know, he was hungry too, as Larry Little said. You know, he didn't want that Shula couldn't win the big game on his head either.
That's
so
right.
They showed everybody. They showed everybody what they were about. So, you know, after that, how could you not respect and fear Coach Shula in a lot of ways? But guys still had a good time. There's still guys who had some personality and had some fun.
Oh, yeah.
And man, when we had Manny Fernandez in the tank, and he talked about the time that he went out hunting. And somehow got the brilliant idea to leave a little present for Coach Shula in his shower.
I had a full track swamp buggy, and we used to hunt the Everglades on our days off. Our day off.
Yeah, days off. When was that? Off season?
Well, we also have Tuesday mornings. We didn't have to be in usually until 11, I think, for a meeting, and then we'd have short practice, getting loose. We'd be out there for an hour and a half. But that Tuesday morning, we'd go out to the Glades. And Bill Stanfill and I, and Zonka, that particular day, it was Bill and I and a couple friends of mine, and we were deer hunting out in the Everglades, and we went through this, what we call a flag pond, and it was just loaded with alligators. Stanfill just leaned over the deck, reached down and snatched one up, about a 3-footer, and we folded it up, put it in the toolbox, and brought it back.
Snatched it up with his hands.
Yeah, he grabbed it up with his hands by the tail. You know, we taped his mouth shut, put him in a toolbox, folded him up, fit him in real nice, brought him back to training camp, and I asked Danny Dow to get him out of the trunk of my car, just bring him in the locker room because I wanted to put him in Coach Shula's shower. Well, Danny loved that. But anyway, I come in after practice, couldn't wait to get in because Coach Shula would always stay out on those days and work with the quarterbacks. So anyway, Danny came in. Did you get him? He says, hell no. He was behind your spare tire, and all I could see was that tail. I said, I told you his mouth was taped shut. Yeah, I'm supposed to believe you? So anyway, I go out. Yeah, I grab Zonk. He was in the locker room. I said, Zonk, come on, give me a hand. I need some cover. So we go out and we grab the alligator, and Larry goes with me into Shula's office, and the secretary was a big Zonka fan. Larry goes in ahead of me and gets her busy doing something. I slip in behind him, get into Coach's office, put it in the shower, close the door, slip back out. We come back out. Now we shower and leave. Well, about 7 o'clock that night, we went over. I don't remember where we went. Went and had a couple of beers, Came back, and we snuck into the locker room, the back door, and Danny's telling us the story. And we're howling. He's talking about how Coach was running all the way out the door with nothing but a towel, stark naked, screaming his head off. We're howling. I mean, we are sitting in the equipment room just howling, and we look up, and there's Coach standing in the doorway.
Oh shit.
I knew it was you. I knew it. We don't know what you're talking about, Coach. Danny's just telling us the story. Bullshit.
He wasn't buying it.
But we never admitted it. It went on for years. It was just a story.
Right.
Until they roasted Coach Arnsparger one night. The Miami Touchdown Club had a roasted Coach Bill. And I got up that night and told the story.
Told the truth. So let it out.
Truth. And I said, and Coach, here's the rest of the story. Coach Arnsparger went into the shower, saw the alligator, because he used to shower in your shower. He went out.
Didn't say anything.
Didn't say anything, showered in the team locker room, and went home. Left you to, gave you up. I said, your trusted head assistant defensive coordinator laid you
just
open.
left an alligator there.
Left him there.
Now, did you guys leave the mouth taped shut, or did
yeah,
we?
No,
okay.
it was taped shut.
Well, that was nice of you.
Oh, yeah.
Man, oh, man. Yeah, I'm glad you did that.
We were still winning ball games.
Right.
Man, oh, man, Seth, I don't know, man. South Florida and Gators, you know. And who would even think to do that to the legend? He wasn't a legend then yet.
Anybody. Juice, I'm a Gator. I don't want one in my shower now.
No doubt about it, man. And I tell you, Coach, from that point on, you know, he laid down the law, but he knows that his guys were all winners in there, but he also let them have a little bit of fun, but he wasn't happy that day at all.
No. I mean, how could he be?
Not at all. And you know what? There's a lot of times when Coach isn't happy in that locker room and, you know, you catch him in a bad mood, you're going to run into some issues, right?
Yeah.
Like the time, you know, when they had a tough loss, and our friend Bobby Monica, he caught some heat in the locker room after a day where Bobby didn't really do anything. He didn't do anything wrong.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Wrong place, wrong time, man.
Well, it started out, you know, my dad was a coach for 40 years, okay? My dad did the draft for the Packers for 16 years.
Oh, no kidding.
Coach Lombardi had Pasta Vazul at my house, you know what I mean? He knew Coach Lombardi, all this stuff. So,
wow.
But for me, I was working for Don Shula, you know, so it was cool as shit to get yelled at by Don Shula. For the first 10 years, I thought my first name was fucking. So, but the whole idea was, get the job done. Coach wanted you to get it done. Just don't let him find out how you got it done. Sometimes you had to, you know, do stuff. But the best thing I can say about Coach is he ripped your ass, you know, and he was on you all the time and he kept you on your toes. But nobody outside of that team could mess with you. You know what I mean? Right. Somebody came at you that wasn't one of us, he jumped their ass.
So he had your back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I got some great ones. Coach Shula, man.
First of all, you gotta give Bobby does a great Shula impersonation.
You gotta call
Eddie
White. You know Eddie White?
Eddie White's got the
best.
Yeah.
So we're going. Let me see. I first get there and we're playing in Buffalo. Now remember the old Buffalo locker room had the lockers going across ways,
right?
So it kind of split it in two. So it was one of my first games, Monday Night Football, and we had the trunks there. We didn't start picking up laundry till Coach was done with his speech. So we're winning at halftime. We come in, we got roasted. So we end up losing. So it ain't like the Dolphins lost on Monday Night Football. It's the Dolphins fuck Coach Shula, made him look bad on Monday Night Football. Right. So he was pissed. So the defense was on the back end, and I'm sitting there in front of, they had stools back then. Bocamper, Betters, Baumhauer, you know, all them guys are sitting in a row on the stools. Everybody's sitting down like this. So I'm sitting on the trunk, and I didn't want to open the lid to get the clothes until he was done. So D-Mac and Judson are over on the side, Don McNeil and William Judson. Remember the tape sharks?
Oh, yeah.
They cut the tape.
With the razor blade on them?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the guys used to tape their wrists like this, put tape on their wrist.
Right.
So it got kind of rolled up. So I forget who it was. It was McNeil or Judson. They were helping each other. One was helping the other one cut this sticker. So he's got like this. He's going like this. And it catches, the razor catches. Boom! Right up his nose with the razor blade. Oh! So he starts with the high pitch, like, covering his nose. Now, instead of just getting a towel and put it over, he goes into the shower that's all tile, and it's echoing.
And blood, it's screaming.
So Coach Shula comes around the corner, right? And he's like, who the fuck is talking while I'm talking? And the first cat he sees is me sitting on that trunk, and he goes, Was it you? He points in my face. His finger was like an inch from my face and it looked like a big sausage, right? And I was like, so I'm like, I was trying to say, no, sir, and I was like, no, sir, came out real high. And Bo Camper, Bomber, and all them guys fell off their stools into their locker. They were laughing so hard. He went bananas.
That's amazing.
Coach, no joke, man.
Oh, my God.
Coach
I was so scared, man.
Well, Bobby caught the heat there, Juice. He caught some serious heat and probably learned a lesson there, even though, he didn't do anything wrong. But what we did find out later is he wasn't sure if it was William Judson or Don McNeil, but we found out who cut his nose, damn near cut his nose off.
Completely off.
Tape cutters. It was indeed William Judson, and we had him in the tank. He owned up to it. But while he was in the tank, he also talked about a much more serious incident, and that was the 1982 strike. And I think that was his first year, and he really told a powerful story of how Coach Shula looked at that, and I think there were some things that players were organizing, and Coach Shula felt one way, but then I think he surprised everybody in how he handled it.
Back in '82, that was my second year. That was my actually first year, because the first year in '81 I was on injury reserve.
Okay.
But '82, I made the team. Had a tremendous mini camp before that season, but I made the team, and I felt pretty good about it. Now we're gonna go on strike. Okay, my gosh, we're going on strike, and I remember Shula. The NFLPA said that we're going to show some solidarity, and we want both teams to meet at midfield and shake hands. And Shula said, I ain't having none of that shit. Y'all, I control this team. Y'all are not going to do that. And so, we were nervous. And I said, dang, I just made the team. I don't want to do that. Nothing against Shula. And so I can't remember. I think it was Seth Levit was our player rep. And he said, guys, what do you guys want to do? Shula said, we better not shake hands. And so we said, hey, a lot of the guys say, forget it. We got to do it. And so he can't cut all of it. So what we decided to do was to go ahead and shake hands at midfield.
The entire team.
The entire team. Now, there were 7 guys that said, I'm not doing it. One of the guys was Kuchenberg. He was kind of like against the union. But all the rest of them were kind of unruly. He said, I ain't going. I don't believe in that. So they had an aerial view they took an aerial view, a shot of the entire field, and you can see everybody's numbers that went out and shook hands. Oh, boy. And so we went ahead and we shook hands, and Shula was growling, standing over there looking. After the game, when we came back to watch the film, all of the guys that did not shake hands, he cut them.
Wow.
He cut them.
Are you serious?
The guys who did not shake hands.
Did not, except Kuchenberg.
Right.
Now, Kuchenberg, he didn't. But everybody else, he cut. And so he had a team meeting. He said, guys, I was kind of just testing you guys. He said, I would rather for you guys to work as a team than to listen to anybody to try to tell you to do something that you believed in. And I gained a lot of respect for him because I was one of those guys saying, awesome. I say, should I not go shake hands? Right. I'm just a young guy. I just made the team.
Imagine that if you'd have stayed back.
I went ahead. He cut them all.
Well, Juice, William Judson's story is another amazing example of how Coach Shula just got it. He just got it. Just when you think he's just kind of off the rails and was going off on players, in the end, he got it, and he understood what was important for his players and understood the importance of team. And that was really cool to hear firsthand from Judson. Yeah. And there was another guy who got to see both sides of Coach Shula. As a guy I spent a lot of time working for, in PR legend Harvey Greene. Harvey talked about Coach being tough, but also that he was fair.
It was great for 2 reasons. One, there wasn't anything Coach Shula hadn't already seen. And you know him, OJ. One thing that separated him from Steinbrenner would blame me for somebody else's mistakes. Shula would blame me only for my own mistakes. And you've seen this. He'd yell at you if something happened. I always equated it to like a thunderstorm. There's thunder, there's lightning, but it passes and daylight comes back. So he would yell at you. He'd get it out of his system. But if he trusted you, he felt you were professional, you knew what you were doing, it would pass. And then 20 minutes later, he'd go back to, treating you as a professional.
Right.
And the best thing, and this is true of some of the coaches I mentioned and true of unfortunately not true of some other coaches that I worked with down here. The best thing is he would listen to you. You know, we'd come off the field and they'd say, okay, what do you need me to do? What do you want? How do I handle this? Right. I mean, you played for him and you know, there were some things about him that I'm sure you understood were tough to deal with, but understood why he did it.
I loved him.
Yeah, but at the end, there were a lot of things that you really appreciated. And the best thing about Coach Shula was when he got mad at you, it would be over and done with, and he would listen to me and ask me for advice in the area that I was supposedly the expert in. You can't ask a coach of anything more than that. He treated people fairly.
I've got a question because I got in trouble one time for a birthday party I had down in the Grove, and I want to know how the hell
trouble once, Juice?
Yeah, just one serious one.
That's not so
and
bad.
I know
then.
you had to know about it too, Harvey, because I went up to I don't know how Coach Shula found out about it, but somebody was talking about, you know, I had a birthday party on Thursday night. You know, we had a game on Sunday. I thought it was okay. Mm-hmm. I lied and said I didn't know about it, but I knew about it. Coach, I knew about it, Coach. I knew about the party. So.
You did know about the party.
About the party.
It's out there now.
But like, so I know a lot of guys have had situations. So do you get a lot of information before it gets to coach? You have to filter a lot of that through?
I mean, the way it works is sometimes I would hear things from Stu, who I know you had on the show, and the stories he didn't tell you a lot better than the stories he did. But, you know, with Coach, there are things I would find out, and sometimes I'd have to break it to him if Stu hadn't or a player hasn't. But the one thing that I said I liked is he'd figure out how to handle it, and he'd ask me for advice. In your situation, I do remember that, and I didn't want to throw anybody under the bus, so I kind of felt let him handle it because I wasn't the first person to tell him. He knew about it when I came in, and you know, and let the discipline out there and how to deal with the media. So there are times where, you have to go in and you really never wanted to be in a position of telling him something he didn't know, because that would be one of the times he would get mad and you might be a guy who's taking some of those bullets.
Right.
You know, why am I finding this out from you?
Right.
It's a good question, but why is he asking me that?
right. Somebody else should be answering that.
Eventually he got over it. But the one thing about Coach Shula is, and you know this, OJ, sometimes you had to think on your feet. When Mike Shula was coaching at Alabama, when Coach Shula would get off the plane on a Saturday when we'd land in the visiting city, I was always advancing. And I always knew the first thing he would ask me when he came off the plane was, what's the Alabama score?
Right.
And again, no cell phones in those days, so I had to call the press box or whatever to get the score, so I had it for him. Well, I couldn't get it for some reason. I couldn't get through, and I didn't have it when he came off the plane. So I was saying, what the hell am I going to do? So he comes off the plane and he says, Harvey, what's the Alabama score? 0-0 in the first, Coach. Oh, okay, good. Let me know when you find anything else out.
At some point, you were right.
That's right. Had to be right.
That's class. And so, OJ, you know, the advancing thing, and really for the listeners as well, because I got to experience this, and different. By the time I was doing it, we really only handled the media stuff. And at that point, we were at least FedExing things, and there was email and all these other things that Harvey didn't have. But Harvey would have us, what we were supposed to do is we'd put all these packets together. You get all these clips from the newspaper clippings. So when those coaches, I mean, it was like game day when they walked off that plane, and you've seen it as a player. You come off as a PR guy, you're running around, you're sweating, you're making sure everybody gets their packets. Their hotel keys were in the packets, if they had per diem, if they had money, and we had to work with the operations guys and get all that stuff together. So I can only imagine for Harvey what that was like, knowing that Shula was, and you don't know what you're going to get, right? They get off that plane, you don't know what you're going to walk into.
Well, I'll tell you two quick things. One, the most important thing in the packet were the clips, because this is before the internet. And when you went up to these other cities, you were kind of like the eyes and ears. So every day,
what's happening in that town?
I would cut out the newspaper articles and the Buffalo Daily News, and you know, I'd have to fax them back so they'd have.
You get like injury reports or what happened.
And actually, Coach Shula always asked me to go up early on Tuesday to Buffalo because Bill Polian had a radio show at 7:00 that he wanted me to take notes about.
Right, that you could listen to down here.
You can't do it now. So I'd land, get my car radio and turn it on and sit there on the side and take notes about Polian talking about injuries or anything.
And find a payphone and call back to Coach.
But there are times where
that's great.
And Seth might remember this. You certainly will. When we landed on Saturday, they don't do this anymore. We would actually go to the visiting site. And do
Jimmy did it the first year.
Do it an hour and a half walkthrough. First, Juice, correct me if I'm wrong, until the equipment truck got there.
Exactly right.
You would go and do some film work.
Exactly right.
And get on the practice field. I remember once when we got there and the equipment truck broke down. And I had to tell Coach, we're going to be late. The equipment truck broke down. He says, well, where the hell was the backup equipment truck? We don't have backup equipment trucks.
Coach, that's a coach,
anyway,
right?
But then Harvey started checking the engines. He'd make the bus drivers turn the engines on.
Oh, that's a whole. Well, I'll tell you a little about that. So I had a checklist, right, of all these things exactly.
I love this story.
So we landed in Providence, and we only had limited time. We were going to Schaefer Stadium when we only had a limited time to do our walkthrough there because they had to kick us out for whatever reason.
Right.
So we only had that window. So the plane lands in Providence, and I'm all set. We got everything all together, and we bring the staircase up to meet the plane. The one front staircase. They pump the staircase up, and it doesn't reach the top. It was for a 757, not a 767. Now, this is Providence. It's not like there are thousands of staircases running around like this. This is before they had jetways. So they open the door, and the staircase is about 3 feet down. And Shula's looking at that, and he's looking at me.
Was this after the Achilles?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Lord.
So smoke is coming out of his ears. Not that he was worried about the drop down, but he knew we were wasting time, and this was time that would be taken away from the amount of time we had to practice. So I was running like crazy, and I had to go to United, and they had to get their staircase because we were flying Delta, and it took about 25 minutes before we actually got that second staircase.
So the whole
to come
team
up.
is on the
And the
plane.
whole team's on the plane. They're all looking at
Looking
me,
out the window.
laughing because they know what's going on.
Oh,
And
man.
I can see them going, ah! So I'm dreading when I finally get this. I want to. If it was concrete. If I could bury a hole there, I would stick myself into it. So Shula comes off the staircase, and since you cursed, I can say it the way he did. He comes to me and he looks at me and he said, "Add that to your fucking checklist." And he walked into the bus, and all the players came down and says, "Way to go! You really screwed that one up."
Right.
And I'll tell you what. I did add it to the checklist because every other week after that, I would ask him to pump those stairs up long before the plane ever got there.
Right. So you know exactly if it's
But
going
he
to
was
work
right.
or not. Yeah, Coach was definitely fair, and Harvey knew that part of it, but he found out the hard way, as we both know, Big Seth. You know what I mean? And but he loved that about Coach. Coach ended up valuing his advice, man, and how to handle the media, and that was one of the toughest parts because Coach did things his way. But Harvey taught him the kind of little bit, not taught him, but showed him some of the media savvy and how you can handle these guys. And Coach had them eating out of palm of hands at times. You know what I mean? But think about it, though. We had another buddy come into the tank, Big Webb, Richmond Webb.
Yes, sir.
And he found out kind of the hard way, too. And when Coach called him up to his office one time, which was a hilarious story because nobody wants to be called in the coach's office.
I can't imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I got myself second year. I got myself. Okay, like Juice just said, played my rookie year, played all the snaps and snap, and we went and played the Raiders in Tokyo. We had 5 preseason games, so I partially tore my PCL in that game. So I had this big brace on that I had to wear. I had to wear the whole season. So I actually missed the first 2 regular season games of my second year. So I came back, and of course, trying to work back into it, this and that. And so anybody that knows Coach Shula, he reads the paper, he reads anything that's in it, whatever, this, and that, blah, blah. So
It's Harvey's fault. We'll blame Harvey.
well, the thing is, the guys are always asking you, are you 100%? Are you this? Are you that? And so I was like, no, I'm not 100%. I'm, 80, 75. You try to put a percentage on, you just know you're not 100% healthy. So sitting over there at St. Thomas in Malacca, the next thing, I think it was around lunchtime, somebody says, "Hey, Coach Shula want to see you." I said, "Oh, shit." Anytime Coach Shula want to see you, it ain't a good deal. So
No.
I'm walking back there at first. I was like, "Man, you want to see me?" I said, "I ain't did nothing." So I said, I go back there, and then, you sit down, and he's intimidating. He's staring you right in your eyes, this thing. Like, what the hell is all this you put in the paper about you're not 100%, and blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, I'm not 100% this and that. So he's like, this and that. So he starts chewing my ass, right? And so me, I was young, kind of immature, so I get sensitive, I get moist, and so this and that. I said, Coach,
Hello.
somebody else in there. You put somebody else in there. I can't take too much. I was like, man, he's drilling me. He said, no. He said, no. He said, what you got to realize is everybody is playing with some type of injury, hurt, or whatever. He said, you got to find a way to get through it, this and that. And so I just said, okay, or whatever. So I walked out of there. I was pissed off because he done just ripped me up. But then after I thought about it, I could appreciate it later because that's what I really needed to hear. if I keep telling people, oh, I'm not hungry, it's like I was putting a target on my own back.
Right.
You got to figure out a way, because I'm going out there. You're going to play. So ain't no need of crying about it or making excuses for it. Find a way to get the job done. And that's what I did. I didn't appreciate it that day, but I think that is something I use throughout the rest of my career, is you got to find a way to try to get it done. So
didn't miss a whole lot of games.
It only took one time to his office, though.
That was it. One and done.
And Big Seth, we know nobody was bigger than Coach Shula, and he didn't care how big you were. You know, if he needed to make a point, your stature meant nothing to him. He was the big man on campus, right? And
Absolutely.
You know what? Another former equipment guy, Tony Edwards, he witnessed that exchange between coach and the NFL commissioner Tagliabue the same way. Even the commissioner wasn't as big as coach. That coach was the man.
First game that we actually get on the sidelines with that golf cart.
He didn't miss a game, right?
No,
he had surgery.
No. First game, and you can look this up, Monday Night Football against the Kansas City Chiefs, and Paul Tagliabue was at the game. To this day, I will argue with anyone, I don't care who it is, that when Coach Shula was in the NFL, he was by far and away the most powerful and most influential individual in the entire league. And I remember Paul Tagliabue comes down and he says, hey, Don, listen, this might not be the best idea. You know,
this being the golf cart on the sideline.
Yeah, okay. The golf cart, this may not be the best idea. That golf cart, we get somebody hurt, somebody runs into it. And I kind of got the impression that's why the commissioner was there. Boy, Coach lit him up like a Christmas tree, like the Christmas tree at the Rockefeller Center. You know, don't you effing tell me what to do. This is my statement. I'll do it. And, it was just so bad that Paul Tagliabue looked at him. He goes, okay, Don, whatever you want. I'll go up to the press box. He goes, yeah, you go up to the press box. Damn. Sure. Paul
Sent
Tagliabue.
the commissioner.
Yeah. But he didn't mess around. I'm telling you, he was the most powerful, and deservingly so.
Right.
He was the most powerful man in the entire league.
And you were driving around on a golf cart.
I was driving around. So here we go.
Hitting the bushes.
Game starts, and John Gamble served as kind of like our get-back guy, our strength and conditioning coach at the time. And here we go. First play from scrimmage. We kick off to them. This kid takes it 95 yards the other way. So at the end of the game, at the end of the play, coach is like completely turned around because we were at one angle and the play finishes up at another angle. He looks down at me and he says, you make sure I'm at an effing angle where I could see each and every play.
So you were supposed to know this guy was going to take
it back, and you got to whip that golf cart around, which is so easy.
Right.
Golf cart's so easy to reverse and forward, reverse and forward.
Making that noise.
The whole sideline full of people and equipment. The easiest job in the world right there.
On occasion, not often, but on occasion, I'd build up enough temerity to say something. And I look up at him. I say, Coach, this isn't the Flintstones. I can't just pick this thing up and turn it around. He looks down at me. He goes, don't you talk back to me. He goes, I'll have you out of here tomorrow.
Well, he just sent the commissioner upstairs.
Yeah. And I'm like,
somebody else can run the PCs. I imagine they can find somebody else to do it.
I was completely deflated for the rest of the game. That was all she wrote.
Man, nobody tells a story like Tony Eglis.
Nobody.
He had a bunch of great ones with Coach. Had some great times. But when you listen to that and you think about some of the other stories we've heard, how could we expect Coach Shula to be intimidated by Paul Tagliabue? Sure, he was the commissioner of the National Football League. Well, you're talking about a man who wasn't intimidated by the president of the United States.
Nobody.
Right,
Nobody.
He wasn't intimidated by anybody. So another man who's rarely intimidated in Stu Weinstein, one of our all-time favorite guests here in the tank. I think the only two-time guest we've ever had dive in the tank. Stu tells some great stories about Coach Shula and some interaction with some of the biggest names on the planet.
My first year, it was probably about week 8 or 9, and this Super Bowl ring that I thought I was going to get, we're now sitting at 5-4, and I don't think we're even in first place. I think we were actually either trailing the Jets or the Patriots, and we're playing the Jets at home. And frankly, if we lose this game, I don't think we're going to make the playoffs. So it's one of these typical late October, early November games. It's 150 degrees out. We're battling the Jets, who had beaten us up there on a Monday night about 3 or 4 weeks before, and things aren't looking good. And as he did hundreds of times in his career, Dan Marino leads us down the field, throws a touchdown pass to Mark Duper, who, as he did 100 times in his career, makes this unbelievable catch, and we end up beating the Jets. So I think we beat them 21-17. So now we're in the cramped locker room of the Orange Bowl after the game, and I'm drenched. And understand this now. The players, the coaches, the staff, they come to the stadium dressed, change, go on the field, come in, take a shower, change, and go home, or if we're on the road, fly back. I couldn't do that because my fear was, while I'm in there taking a shower, someone's going to come in the locker room that's not supposed to be there. So the way I came to the stadium, or the way I came to the stadium on the road, is how I went home. So I'm standing there just drenched in sweat. Coach Shula's sitting there. He hasn't even changed yet, just exhausted from the game. And in walks Don Johnson. And of course, Don Johnson at the time is one of the co-stars of Miami Vice, which at the time, if not the most popular show in the country, is certainly the most popular show in Florida.
It was a national hit. Crockett and Tubbs. I was watching in Ohio. Absolutely.
So he comes in with his entourage, and Bobby Monica, our equipment manager, knew him and brings him over to introduce him to Coach Shula.
Bobby had been on the show, I think.
I think Bobby had been on the show. I think Bobby did play.
Tony learned it from somewhere.
Yeah. So he comes over, brings him over, and introduces him to Coach Shula. Coach Shula, sitting down, looks up at him, and when Bobby tells him he's with Miami Vice, Coach Shula tells him, he says, well, keep up the good work out there. You guys do a great job.
Had no clue.
So there's a kind of an uncomfortable hushed silence. So Bobby jumps in and says, Coach, he said, no. He said, you don't understand. He said, Don Johnson's with Miami Vice. He's an actor with Miami Vice. And Coach Shula looks up again, and without using bad language, which I promised my wife I wouldn't do on the show.
We'll take up for you on that one there. So we'll make sure we cover it.
Looks up and says, Monica, he said, I know what an effing vice cop does. You don't need to tell me. Now Don Johnson was shocked. I mean, he couldn't believe that someone didn't know who
he figured everybody in the world knew who he was
so
at that
his
point.
head's down, and he kind of limps out with his entourage. Coach Shula takes a shower. We're the last two guys out of the locker room. We go up to get his wife, and on the way up the elevator, I said to him, Coach, do you have any idea who that guy was? And I explained to him who Don Johnson is and the show and all that. And the only answer he had was that if the show was on Friday nights, which it was, that was date night for him and his wife, and he didn't never watch the show.
That was it.
We get up to get her, and she was appalled that he didn't know who, because she did. She certainly knew who.
So she was thinking about something else on date night, apparently, because she knew exactly who Don Shula was.
He was like most of these head coaches, all the head coaches I've worked for, these guys are all football. I mean, that's how they got there. And that's kind of what they did. The other story I can tell was actually during the off season, Coach Shula and myself and his wife go to watch a Marlins game, and we're sitting in their suite, and word comes down that Wayne Huizenga, who at this time had bought the team and also owned the Marlins, had the first President Bush at the stadium as his guest, and he's sitting in the founders area, which is down on the field. So I go down there to see about getting President Bush to come up to Coach Shula's suite, and the Secret Service guys tell me they can't do that because they hadn't walk the route, and it might be whatever. So I go back up.
It's just national security
to try to get Coach Shula to come down to meet with President Bush, and he wants President Bush to come up, and between the two of them, they never hooked up.
That's right.
It was just a big game of chicken, and nobody was going to give.
More than that, the Pope comes in town, and this is during a training camp. And Coach Shula gets invited to a mass, which was at the Archdiocese, which is probably about, I guess, maybe 15, 20 minutes away from training camp. It's still at St. Thomas. And Coach Shula, of course, again, it's in training camp, so he's not about to leave training camp to go visit with anybody. So he tells me to call over there and see if the Pope will stop by, which, of course, again, for security reasons, didn't work.
I love that. I know Stu didn't make the call to the Pope. He didn't put the call into the Pope, but the fact that Coach even felt that maybe the Pope would change his schedule for him just shows you where he stood here in South Florida and really across the entire league. And Stu did a great job of sharing those stories. And I think all the stories, man, I'm so appreciative of our guests over the last 2 seasons of having shared these stories, Juice. And when you hear them in real time, they're all a lot of fun. But in a moment like this, when you really need to reflect about someone who was so important to this franchise, this was our little way of paying tribute and celebrating the man that was Coach Shula.
Yeah, man. Coach was a legend, and everybody looked at him that way. And I tell you what, it's just funny to see these guys and the stories that, that they had, their interactions with Coach. And, you can look up his numbers, his wins and losses and, things like that. But to see what guys had to say from the heart, and from what they felt and what they witnessed in person, that's what's special about this man. He had a personal connection with everybody. on his team. From, you talk about, equipment guys to our head of security to, guys like that, to his players. There's nobody that Coach did not, touch in terms of, a personal relationship with. And that's what's special about Coach Shula. So many guys, coach, and that's all they do. This guy right here, he was an integral part of people's lives, and people talk about it to this day. And it was a special moment for me. I know it's a special moment for all my teammates, and I know it's a special moment for South Florida community.
No question about it, Juice. And again, I know today was a difficult day for you to do this, but I appreciate you spending some time. And it was a lot of fun looking back on these stories, and I hope everybody enjoys them. And
thank you guys for diving in, man. And we love you, Coach. We'll miss you.
Dog fans were at a talking about the devil in their